The next reinforcement to our weather pattern could be a record-breaking storm that sinks into the eastern United States later this week and into the weekend. Look at how cool some of these temperatures are going to be, as much as around 20 to 25 degrees below average. This video has all the details you need on the rain that could come with that system and ahead of it, plus those temperatures. Let's get into it.
One Nation Weather.
Thank you for taking time out of your week to tune into my forecast right here at One Nation Weather. Don't forget, as always, that these model maps that I use throughout my videos are from Weatherbell, and you can check out their free trial link. It is below in the description. Also, if you're new to the channel, it is a great time to subscribe right now, not only because this video will hopefully give you good details on the week ahead, but also because later this week or this upcoming weekend, I'm anticipating to release my first winter forecast for 2024 into 2025. As you can see from the background that was just on screen, I'm already working on some of the graphics. I would love if you turned on those notifications and are subscribed to the channel so you catch that when it comes out. But anyway, let's get right into this update with a look at those temperature anomalies as we go through the rest of this week. As I've been saying in the last few videos, temperature anomalies really show you where fronts are, and really that shows us exactly what's going on with our entire weather pattern. So to overview this pattern, you can see as we start out this week, heading out of our Labor Day, as I film this into our Tuesday, September 3rd of 2024, we're looking at cooler than average conditions by at least about 5 to 10 degrees anywhere from Texas up to Maine. This is behind a cold front that will keep things a little bit more active this week closer to the Gulf Coast states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Those are going to be the states where we're going to have daily chances for some rain as that front sinks around and really just sticks around. You can see the cooler air that's going to linger around right behind it. By Thursday, we're still looking at some 5-degree below average temperatures through those states and just north of those states. That's just front number one of this week, though, because behind this one, we're actually going to see some warmer air rise up into the Midwest and Great Lakes in this circled area that I'm actually putting the circle on right now. But look in the western part of this circled area, parts of Minnesota, into South Dakota, Nebraska. We've got western Kansas. It's looking like we're going to be a little bit below average already by late Thursday. That's the signs of our second cold front of the week, and the big one that could be record breaking, that's going to make its way on in through some parts of the north central plains. And look at those greens, even some of those bright blues moving into Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. Those are going to be some of the peak states for this cooler air to really move into. That northwest to southeast flow is really going to be cranking. There's going to be some gusty winds heading out of Friday into Saturday. Behind some of the rainfall, that's when these winds are especially going to pick up, and temperatures are going to be downright chilly at night, and we could even see some frost and freeze conditions in some locations as this 15 to 25 degree below average air moves into place. I do want to point out that as we go into Sunday and Monday, we'll also see other areas in the east coast of the U.S. get impacted by that cooler air. And let me show you the precipitation that's going to bring this overall pattern into place. Now, as we play things out going into our Tuesday, September 3rd, overall not a lot going on across the country. Pretty much bone dry from the central plains to the northeast, but we do have that lingering first front down here from Texas to Florida. Get used to that. That's going to be around for most of the week. Also, some isolated severe storms possible late Tuesday into early Wednesday over parts of Idaho, western Montana, and western Wyoming. Notice that's going to be with our next front. You can see that a little bit of that orientation to that front already getting going by the time we get into our Wednesday evening. First, I want to zoom in, though, and show you how heavy some of this rain is going to be, particularly over far southern Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then a lot of far southern Alabama and into Florida, at least according to this model late Wednesday. This is going to add up, and this is going to create a flood problem, if not by Tuesday and Wednesday, definitely into, say, Thursday and Friday with this first front lingering around in the Gulf Coast. And then there's our next front. You can see at least the isolated storm coverage indicated by those lighter greens in that spotty nature in parts of Montana, Wyoming, into northern Colorado, over into western parts of Nebraska, into some areas of the Dakotas, and then Minnesota. Those are the only states, so 6 states really, 7 states-ish, being impacted by very isolated storm coverage late Wednesday. That front continues east into some parts of the Midwest and upper Midwest Thursday. Couldn't rule out an isolated severe storm, but overall that's not favored with this kind of setup in most communities just because of how weak this front is at least going to be in terms of its precipitation side of things. It's definitely going to have that cool air behind it, and in fact, the front's going to begin to pick up in terms of its intensity, even precipitation-wise, by Friday. You can see that vertical front from Michigan down to around Texas, combining with some of the energy from that old front near some parts of the mid-south and southeast. Really anywhere in this overall area by the end of this week, we could have some chance for rain out of either the old front lifting back northward in the southern U.S., or obviously that new one that's going to be bringing in the cool air behind it. What I can tell you is that the precipitation is looking very heavy into our Saturday, into parts of the mid-Atlantic and the northeastern states. You can see that lifting on up there with that low-pressure system. Then we'll see things dry out and cool down behind it as it really sits over the Great Lakes region with that northwest flow behind it. Now, I want to show you the 6-hour precipitation increments from our GFS ensemble members. This is basically like a collection of models averaged out. That's a good way to think of it. And this is going to go a little bit differently than what the European model alone is showing. And this is obviously our American model instead of the European model. So we're looking at a little bit of different guidance, that's for sure. And I want you to know that Going through Thursday, everything looks about the same. In terms of our old front lingering around the Gulf Coast, our new one moving through some parts of the north central U.S. Now that I've done the overview, though, I want to go a little bit more in-depth on some of this heavy rain that we're going to have from this old front down here near the Gulf Coast, and then that lighter rain up here in some parts of the Midwest, and how these two areas could combine by the time we get out of Thursday into Friday. A lot of model guidance, including this GFS guidance, does have some of this rain that's near the Gulf Coast at this point in time, late Thursday, trying to merge from south to north on up there into the Ohio Valley region by Friday with that energy that's going to be coming in from the north and west. Let me play it out so you can see what I mean. While I do this, think back to that European model guidance that I showed you earlier that really just showed these two areas staying separate. Some rain near the Gulf Coast, and then our other front up here into some parts of the Great Lakes region. You can see that front up in the Great Lakes region, our new one that's going to bring possibly record-breaking temperatures behind it. But then also notice some of those greens shifting way further up through Georgia and into the Carolinas, even as far north as Virginia and Kentucky with those grays. That's some higher confidence that we could see some sort of low form along our old front that will be lingering around all week, finally moving a little bit further north and actually connecting maybe a little bit earlier in the Ohio Valley as opposed to in the mid-Atlantic with that second front. So it's a little bit complicated, and there's a lot of moving pieces around. If you need to rewatch something, certainly do so. What I can tell you is that by the time we go into our Saturday, a lot of rain over some parts of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and then behind that, again, we do wrap things up and quiet down. What isn't going to wrap up and quiet down quite as quickly are these winds that are going to be moving in from the northwest to the southeast behind this low-pressure system and the associated cold front. As we go towards around Thursday, that's when things are really going to kick off for the Dakotas, Nebraska, into parts of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin. We've got Michigan, northern Illinois, northern Indiana already feeling some 20-mile-per-hour wind gusts at times. Up there in the Dakotas, that's where you're going to have the best chance of feeling that cooler air moving in with that wind. Some of those gusts upwards of 25 miles per hour in isolated fashion. The same deal will go as we go into our Friday. Anywhere from the upper Midwest through some parts of the mid and upper Mississippi Valley, back down to the south central plains, looking at some 20 to 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts, at least according to this model, moving in behind this front late Friday. Going into our Saturday, this is going to be the broadest day for some of those winds. In fact, even ahead of the front picking up in the northeast with some winds coming off the Atlantic. You can see 20 to 30 mile per hour wind gusts are going to be a pretty common thing into our Saturday afternoon. Really anywhere probably from around Arkansas at the minimum to as far north here as around Michigan and over to New York. Coming off of Lake Michigan there into far northern parts of Indiana and far western parts of Michigan, we could certainly see some 30 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts. Probably not wind advisory worthy for most people, but this is definitely a breezier storm, and like one that we really haven't seen in quite a while, since really back in the spring for a broad area. Now that I've looked at all those details regarding this front, it's time to take a deep dive into the temperature side of things. Let's start with those anomalies day by day as we go through the rest of this week. Starting with our Tuesday, September 3rd of 2024, notice our first front. Again, this is that one that's going to sit near the Gulf Coast and then possibly lift back further north later this week. The cooler air behind it from Texas over to Maine. Temperatures at least 5 to 10 degrees below average at the minimum by the time we go into our Tuesday afternoon and evening. By Thursday, you can see how that's really focused closer to the Gulf Coast and southeast, as that's where our precipitation is going to be the best chance out of that front lingering. Back on up here into some parts of the Midwest and the North Central Plains, we've got that warmer air, but the cooler air is knocking on the door. The far western U.S. is just going to be baking even as we go Wednesday, Thursday, into Friday. And even as we go towards Saturday, look at that, the Pacific Northwest continuing to be warmer than average. But I know a lot of my viewers are over here in the Midwest and Great Lakes, and yes, you are at least going to be around 15 degrees below average. I can say that with confidence here. Iowa, Minnesota, back down to Missouri, into Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and into Michigan. At the minimum, I think you're going to be around 15 degrees below average at some point Saturday. This is a big cool down on the way, everyone, and I want to show you how it comes in with those exact temperatures day by day. Let's start in the near term, though. Obviously, we've got a first front that's moving through, and honestly, this is going to bring quite the cooler air from around Iowa to over to around the Maine vicinity Tuesday morning on our September 3rd. We're at least as low as about 50 degrees. This is abnormally cool, but this is just a precursor for a lot of folks to what that second front later this week is going to bring. Up there in parts of north central New York, though, into Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and northwestern parts of Maine, we could certainly be touching the 30s, maybe even getting towards frost or, dare I say, freeze conditions in those highest elevations Tuesday morning out of this first front. That is going to be short-lived. Even as we go into Tuesday afternoon, you can already see the 70s returning into some of those areas. We've got a lot of mid and upper 70s in parts of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley Tuesday afternoon. Hotter spots are going to be down there in the Gulf Coast where we're near that front. 90s there, some 90s in the north central plains, and then down in the southwest U.S. Wednesday morning is really just a milder version of our Tuesday morning morning that I just showed you. So I want to go ahead and jump into our Wednesday afternoon. You can see the atmosphere really priming up for that next front out here in the North Central Plains and the Midwest. Behind the first front that's now going to be down near the Gulf Coast, we've got temperatures in the upper 80s, moving into the low 90s in some parts of the North Central Plains, at least mid to upper 80s in a lot of the areas of the Midwest and Ohio Valley. Things are going to even continue to warm up there going into Thursday. I'll show you that in just a moment. But also notice this heat that's going to be filling in the valleys of California, far southern Nevada, southwestern Utah, as well as into western Arizona. Triple-digit heat for sure in many communities there Wednesday, and we'll do it all over again Thursday. Look at how warm we're starting Thursday morning in some of those spots. Near 90 degrees for a minimum low in southeast California and southwestern Arizona. That is some hot stuff there. And you really can't complain if you got the 60s and 70s, even with the humidity there near the Gulf Coast on Thursday morning, because that is just miserable to wake up to 90 degrees in the southwest. Here we go. I mentioned that I would show you that heat that's going to continue as we go into Thursday. Here it is, picking up to near 90. I think we'll get very near it in some parts of Chicago, Fort Wayne, Indiana, into western central Ohio, southern Michigan Thursday, ahead of that next front as the precipitation moves through Thursday going into Friday. Possibly some stronger storms along this front. You can already see by Friday morning, we're going to have some 40s behind the front, but still some 60s in the morning out ahead of it. This is not, your big gangbuster like winter front, but certainly look at how cool it's already going to be in some parts of the upper Midwest and into the northern Great Lakes by Friday afternoon. 60s and 70s widespread across that region. Still pretty cool even down here from that first front in parts of Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas. That could be rain induced, especially if you go with that GFS guidance like I was showing you earlier. Friday afternoon's highs, though, are going to be the hottest in the southwestern quarter of the country, as well as on up there in the Pacific Northwest, where we'll be breaking record highs into parts of Washington and Oregon. Now let's get into the days that I know you're really thinking about, because this is when that cooler air is really going to surge on in, and I cannot say really with enough emphasis. 40s and even some 30s the closer you get to the Canadian border up here in the upper Midwest, into the upper Great Lakes, into our Saturday morning. 50s moving as far south as southern Missouri and into parts of Kentucky by this point. Saturday afternoon with that wind moving in 20 to 30 miles per hour for those gusts at times, with the jet stream digging in like this. Look at this, 70s sinking as far south as northern Arkansas. We've got northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, into parts of Tennessee, only near around 80. And of course, the further north you go into the Great Lakes, the closer you are to near 55 to 65 for a high. And then by Sunday morning, if this does not scream October-like weather, I don't know what does. This seems like this is a month early, if not more. The bottom line there, most spots north of it are at least down to around 50 degrees. Some spots north of that second line down below 45. And if you go up there to the Arrowhead of Minnesota, into parts of Wisconsin, the upper peninsula of Michigan, even some parts of central Michigan, we'll be dropping down to around 40 to even that borderline upper 30s frost-like conditions. Sunday afternoon, parts of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast start to cool off behind that range, 60s and 70s there. If you want to be with me for all my updates on the rest of this system, as well as, of course, what I'm about to pull up back on screen right now, that winter forecast, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button down below. My winter forecast #1, that's probably coming around the Sunday time frame of this upcoming weekend once this system's out of the way. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your support. Have a blessed rest of your day. I'll see you in the next update, and of course with that winter forecast as well.